The golden sun painted shadows across the drought-cracked earth as Remington Cole rode his weary horse over the last ridge. Spotting something unusual silhouetted against the dying light, a motionless figure slumped beside what appeared to be a fallen animal. What caught his eye in this desolate stretch of Arizona territory in 1878 would forever alter the course of his solitary existence. Rem pulled his hat lower against the setting sun and nudged his horse, a sturdy chestnut gelding named Copper, toward the strange tableau. As he drew closer, he made out the form of a young woman curled up against the side of a mule that lay sprawled on its side, its breathing labored and shallow. The woman's dress, once a cheerful blue, was now dust-covered and torn. Her chestnut hair had fallen loose from its pins, cascading over her shoulder as she slept or perhaps had collapsed from exhaustion. He dismounted cautiously, his boots hitting the ground with a soft thud. The woman didn't stir. Approaching slowly to avoid startling her, Rem crouched down and gently touched her shoulder. "Miss, are you all right?" She jolted awake, eyes wild with fear before focusing on him. They were striking eyes the color of sage after rain and filled with a mixture of desperation and defiance. "Don't hurt us," she whispered, one hand protectively stretching toward the mule's neck. "I ain't here to hurt nobody," Rem said, keeping his voice soft. "Just passing through and saw you here. You need help." The woman's gaze drifted to the mule, and her face crumpled. "Bessie's dying," she said, her voice breaking. "She's all I had left in the world." Something in her words, in the raw honesty of her grief, struck Rem deeply. He'd seen plenty of hardship on the frontier, had experienced more than his share, but the naked vulnerability in this stranger's voice reached past the walls he'd built around himself. "I'm Remington Cole," he said, removing his hat. "Most folks call me Remington." She hesitated before answering. "Katherine Winters." "Kate." Kate stroked the mule's neck as it wheezed painfully. "We've been together since St. Louis. Pa bought her for me when we set out west 3 years ago." Rem turned his attention to the mule, examining it with gentle hands. The animal was severely dehydrated, with signs of exhaustion and possibly some kind of internal injury. He'd seen enough dying livestock to know Bessie wouldn't last the night. "What happened to you out here, Miss Winters?" he asked, straightening up. Kate's eyes welled with tears she seemed determined not to shed. "Outlaws. 3 days back. They took our wagon, our supplies. Shot Pa." Her voice broke. "I buried him yesterday morning. Bessie was all I had left to get somewhere safe." Rem felt a familiar anger rise within him, the kind that came whenever he encountered the cruelty that seemed to thrive in these untamed territories. He'd spent 5 years as a bounty hunter after the war before trying his hand at ranching, and he'd seen the worst men could do. "Where were you headed?" he asked. "Silvercreek. My aunt lives there. She wrote us last year, said we could join her." Rem knew Silvercreek. It was a growing mining town about 40 miles southwest, 2 days' ride at a steady pace. "You can't stay here," he said, looking around at the barren landscape. Night was approaching, and with it all manner of dangers. "And your mule." Kate's fingers tightened in the animal's mane. "I know. I've known since noon. Just couldn't leave her." The sun had nearly disappeared behind the distant mountains, painting the sky in violent strokes of crimson and gold. Rem made a decision. "I've got water and food in my saddlebags. We'll make camp here tonight, and I'll take you to Silvercreek tomorrow." Kate looked up at him, suspicion warring with desperate hope in her eyes. "Why would you help me?" It was a fair question. Out here, kindness often came with conditions or ulterior motives. Rem shrugged, uncomfortable with examining his motivations too closely. "Because it's what decent folks do," he said simply. "And there ain't enough decent left in these parts." As night fell, Rem built a small fire and shared his jerky and beans with Kate. He'd managed to get her to drink some water and eat a little, though she remained beside the dying mule, whispering to it occasionally, stroking its neck as its breathing grew more labored. "Your pa," Rem said as they sat in the flickering firelight. "Was he taking you to Silvercreek to mine?" Kate shook her head. "He was a carpenter. Good with his hands." A ghost of a smile touched her lips. "He built fine furniture back in St. Louis. Was hoping to set up shop in Silvercreek since the town's growing." "That's honest work," Rem said with approval. "What about you, Mr. Cole? What takes you across this stretch of nowhere?" Rem poked at the fire with a stick. "Heading back to my place. Got a small spread about a day's ride north of Silvercreek. Been in Tucson selling some horses." "You're a rancher?" "Trying to be," he admitted. "Got about 60 head of cattle, a dozen horses. It's not much, but it's mine." They fell silent, the crackling of the fire and the mule's labored breathing the only sounds in the vast darkness. Rem noticed how Kate's shoulders slumped with exhaustion, but she refused to leave the mule's side. "You should get some rest," he suggested. "I'll keep watch." Kate shook her head stubbornly. "I won't leave Bessie alone." Rem respected her loyalty, even as he recognized the pain it would bring her. "Then I'll sit with you both." He moved to the other side of the mule and settled down, his rifle across his lap, a habit from years when vigilance meant survival. The mule's eyes were dull now, its breathing shallow. "My ma died when I was 7, Rem found himself saying, surprising himself with the confession. "Influenza. Pa never really recovered from losing her. He died during the war, fighting for the Union." Kate looked up at him across the dying animal between them. "I'm sorry. It was a long time ago. Does it ever stop hurting?" she asked softly. Rem considered the question seriously. "No," he answered honestly. "But you learn to carry it different. Becomes part of you instead of something crushing you." Around midnight, the mule gave a final shudder and went still. Kate made a small, broken sound and buried her face in the animal's neck. Rem sat quietly, allowing her this moment of grief. When her shoulders stopped shaking, he spoke gently. "I'll help you bury her in the morning." Kate nodded, finally allowing herself to be led away from Bessie's body to the fire. Rem gave her his bedroll and watched as exhaustion finally claimed her. In sleep, the lines of worry and grief smoothed from her face, revealing how young she truly was, probably no more than 22 or 23, only a few years younger than his 30. At dawn, Rem dug a grave for the mule while Kate gathered wildflowers that somehow managed to grow among the rocks. They said no words over the burial, but Kate placed the flowers on the small mound before turning away, her face set in determined lines. "Thank you," she said simply. Rem nodded. "We should get moving. Ground's gonna bake once the sun's high." He helped her onto Copper, then mounted behind her. Kate sat stiffly at first, clearly uncomfortable with the proximity. But as they rode, the rhythm of the horse's gait and sheer exhaustion caused her to gradually relax against him. "Tell me about Silvercreek," she said after they'd been riding for an hour. "Is it a good place?" Rem considered the question. "It's growing fast because of the silver mine. Has its rough edges like any mining town, but there's families there too. Sheriff's a good man named Holt who keeps the peace pretty well. And my Aunt Hannah Winters, do you know her?" "Name sounds familiar. Might be the lady who runs the boarding house on Pine Street." Kate twisted slightly to look up at him. "She has a boarding house?" She didn't mention that in her letters. "Bought it about 8 months back from old Widow Jenkins, if it's the same Hannah Winters. Decent place. Clean." Hope flickered across Kate's face for the first time. "Maybe I could help her run it. I'm good at keeping accounts and cooking." "I reckon she'd welcome the help," Rem said, finding himself smiling at her renewed spirit. They stopped briefly at midday to rest the horse and eat some jerky. Kate seemed lost in thought as she stared out at the landscape of red rocks and sparse vegetation. "It's beautiful in its own way," she said suddenly. "Harsh, but beautiful." Rem followed her gaze. He'd traveled these territories for years but rarely stopped to consider their beauty. "I suppose it is. In St. Louis, everything was so crowded. Buildings pressing in, people everywhere. Out here you can breathe." She inhaled deeply as if to demonstrate. "Even with all its dangers, there's something honest about this land." Rem studied her with new interest. Most Eastern women he'd encountered viewed the territories as a savage wilderness to be endured rather than appreciated. Kate Winters was different. As they continued their journey, Kate began asking questions about ranching, genuine, thoughtful questions about cattle breeding, water management, and dealing with the harsh seasons. Rem found himself explaining more than he usually would, surprised by her quick understanding and practical observations. "You know a fair bit about livestock for a city girl," he remarked. Kate smiled slightly. "My grandfather had a farm in Pennsylvania. I spent summers there as a child. Besides, I've had 3 years of learning the hard way since we left St. Louis." By late afternoon, they crested a hill, and Silvercreek came into view in the valley below, a growing town of wooden buildings, with the silver mine visible on the hillside beyond it. "There it is," Rem said. "Your new home." Kate stared at the town, and Rem felt her stiffen against him. What if Aunt Hannah doesn't want me? What if she's changed her mind? "Then we'll figure something else out," Rem heard himself say, surprising himself with the "we." He'd planned to drop her off and continue to his ranch, but somewhere during their journey, he'd begun to feel responsible for her welfare. They rode down into town as the sun was beginning its descent. Silvercreek was busy with the usual late afternoon activities, miners coming off shift, merchants closing up shops, saloon girls beginning to appear on balconies. Several people called greetings to Rem, looking curiously at Kate. The boarding house was a neat 2-story building with green shutters and a small sign reading "Winters Boarding House." A middle-aged woman was sweeping the front porch when they rode up. She looked up, shading her eyes against the sun. "Can I help you folks?" she called. Kate went very still in front of Remington. "Aunt Hannah?" she called, her voice uncertain. The woman dropped her broom. "Katherine? Katherine Winters? Good heavens!" Rem helped Kate dismount, and she ran to her aunt, who embraced her tightly. "My dear girl, we've been so worried. Your last letter said you'd be here by early July, and it's nearly August." Hannah held Kate at arm's length, examining her. "Where's your father? And your things?" Kate's face crumpled, and Hannah immediately pulled her close again, looking over her niece's shoulder at Rem with questioning eyes. "Madam," Rem said, removing his hat, "perhaps we should take this conversation inside." In Hannah Winters' tidy kitchen, Kate told her story: the attack by outlaws, her father's death, her journey with the dying mule, and how Rem had found her. Hannah wept openly, holding her niece's hand, while Rem sat uncomfortably, feeling like an intruder on their grief. "Thank God you found her, Mr. Cole," Hannah said finally, wiping her eyes. "I can't bear to think what might have happened if you hadn't come along." Rem shifted in his chair. "Just happened to be passing through, madam. Nevertheless, you saved my niece's life, and I won't forget it." Hannah squeezed Kate's hand. "You'll stay here, of course. I have plenty of room, and as it happens, I could use help with the boarding house." Relief washed over Kate's face. "I'm a hard worker, Aunt Hannah. I won't be a burden." "Nonsense. Your family." Hannah turned to Remington. "And you, Mr. Cole, must stay for supper at least." "It's the least I can do." Rem hesitated. He'd planned to ride a few more hours before making camp, to reach his ranch by tomorrow evening. But the thought of a home-cooked meal was tempting, and something else kept him from refusing outright the realization that once he left this kitchen, he might never see Kate Winters again. "I'd be obliged," he found himself saying. Hannah beamed. "Excellent. Kate, why don't you freshen up while I show Mr. Cole to the dining room? There's hot water for washing, and I have some dresses that might fit you until we can get new ones made." Left alone in the dining room with a cup of coffee, Rem gazed out the window at the busy street. Silvercreek was thriving, with new buildings going up on the outskirts. It was a far cry from his isolated ranch with its simple cabin and endless work. For a moment, he felt a strange longing for something he couldn't quite name. Kate appeared in the doorway an hour later, and Rem nearly didn't recognize her. She'd bathed and changed into a simple green dress that brought out the color of her eyes. Her hair was pinned up neatly, though a few stubborn strands had escaped to frame her face. The trail dust and exhaustion were gone, revealing a natural beauty that made Rem suddenly conscious of his own dusty clothes and unshaven face. "You clean up nice," he said awkwardly, standing as she entered. A faint blush colored her cheeks. "Thank you for saying so. I feel human again." She hesitated. "And thank you, Mr. Cole, for everything. I don't know how to repay your kindness." "There's nothing to repay," he said gruffly. Hannah bustled in with a steaming pot roast, and soon they were joined by the boarding house's other residents, a young schoolteacher, an elderly retired judge, and a clerk from the assayer's office. The conversation flowed easily, with Hannah proudly introducing Kate as her niece who would be helping run the boarding house. As they ate, Rem observed Kate. Despite her recent trauma, she engaged warmly with the other boarders, asking thoughtful questions and listening attentively to their answers. When the judge inquired about her journey west, she gave a carefully edited version that mentioned her father's passing but spared the violent details. "And how do you know Mr. Cole?" the schoolteacher asked innocently. Kate's eyes met Rem's across the table. "He found me when I was in trouble and brought me safely to Silvercreek. I owe him my life." Rem felt uncomfortable under the appreciative gazes now turned his way. "Anyone would have done the same," he muttered. "Not anyone," the judge said knowingly. "The territories can be a lawless place." After dinner, Hannah insisted that Rem stay the night rather than begin his journey in darkness. "I have an empty room, and your horse could use the rest," she pointed out practically. Rem knew he should refuse. He'd imposed enough, but the thought of a rail bed after weeks on the trail was too tempting. "That's mighty generous, Mrs. Winters." Later, as the house quieted for the night, Rem stepped onto the back porch for a smoke. The night was clear, with a million stars scattered across the velvet sky. He was contemplating the constellations when the door opened behind him. "May I join you?" Kate asked softly. Rem quickly stubbed out his cigarette. "Of course." She came to stand beside him at the railing, wrapped in a shawl against the night's chill. For a while, they simply stood in companionable silence, looking at the stars. "I never thanked you properly," Kate said finally. "You did." "No." She turned to face him. "I was in shock, grieving. I didn't fully understand what you did for me. You didn't just save my life, Mr. Cole. You gave me back my future when I thought everything was lost." The sincerity in her voice made something twist in Rem's chest. "It's just Rem. And you're stronger than, Miss Winters. You would have found a way." "Kate," she corrected gently. "And I'm not so sure about that." She looked back at the stars. "What will you do now?" "Go back to your ranch. That's the plan. Got cattle to tend to, fences to mend. Always something that needs doing." "It sounds lonely." The observation, made without judgment, struck a chord. Rem had never thought of his life as lonely, solitary, perhaps, but not lonely. Yet hearing her say it aloud made him suddenly aware of the silence that awaited him at his ranch. The empty cabin, the days without conversation. "It's peaceful," he said, but the words sounded hollow even to his own ears. Kate smiled softly. "I hope you'll visit Silvercreek sometimes. Aunt Hannah would be happy to have you stay here whenever you're in town." "Just your aunt?" The question slipped out before Rem could stop it. In the moonlight, he saw color rise in her cheeks. "I would like to see you again too," she admitted. "I don't have many friends here yet." "Friends?" The word both pleased and disappointed him, though he couldn't say why. "I come to town for supplies every few weeks," he said. "I'll stop by." Kate smiled, and something about it made the night seem a little warmer. "I'll hold you to that promise." Remington Cole. The next morning, Rem prepared to leave after breakfast. Hannah packed him food for the journey, thanking him repeatedly for bringing her niece safely to her. Kate walked him to where Copper was saddled and waiting. "Safe travels," she said, looking up at him as he mounted. "Take care of yourself, Kate Winters," he replied, tipping his hat. As he rode out of town, Rem found himself looking back more than once at the diminishing figure of the woman standing in the street, watching him go. The ranch welcomed Rem back with all its familiar problems: a broken fence in the north pasture, a lame horse that needed tending, and cattle that had wandered during his absence. He threw himself into work, trying to ignore the strange restlessness that had taken hold of him since leaving Silvercreek. 2 weeks passed before he admitted to himself that he was looking for excuses to return to town. Finally, on the pretext of needing supplies that could have waited another month, Rem rode into Silvercreek one sunny afternoon. The Winters boarding house looked different, somehow brighter, with flower boxes in the windows that hadn't been there before. As Rem tied Copper to the hitching post, the front door opened, and Kate emerged, carrying a basket of laundry. She stopped when she saw him, a smile breaking across her face that made his heart do something complicated in his chest. "You came back," she said, setting down her basket. "Said I would." Rem removed his hat, suddenly conscious of his dusty clothes and the 3-day stubble on his jaw. "I was in town for supplies." Kate's knowing smile suggested she didn't entirely believe him. "Aunt Hannah will be delighted. She's just made apple pie." "Didn't mean to impose." "You're not imposing. You're a friend visiting." Kate picked up her basket again. "Come inside when you're ready. I need to hang these sheets, but there's coffee on the stove." Rem found himself following her around to the backyard, where a clothesline stretched between 2 posts. "Let me help with that," he offered, taking the heavy basket from her. Kate looked surprised but handed him clothespins as she shook out sheets and hung them. The domestic task should have felt strange to Rem, who was more accustomed to breaking horses and mending fences, but there was something peaceful about it. "How's ranch life?" Kate asked as they worked. "Same as always. Lot of work for one man." He hesitated. "How are you settling in?" Kate's face brightened. "Better than I expected. Aunt Hannah has been teaching me the business side of running the boarding house. I've started keeping the books and helping with meals, and I've met some nice people in town." "Good. That's good." Rem felt unreasonably jealous of these unnamed nice people. They finished hanging the laundry, and Kate led him into the kitchen, where she poured coffee and cut a generous slice of apple pie. They were alone, Hannah having gone to purchase groceries. "Tell me more about your ranch," Kate said, sitting across from him at the kitchen table. "You mentioned cattle and horses, but I'd like to hear the details." To Rem's surprise, he found himself talking more than he had in months, describing his land, his struggles with the unreliable water source, his plans for expanding his herd if he could secure more grazing rights. Kate listened attentively, asking intelligent questions that showed genuine interest. "It sounds wonderful," she said when he finally ran out of words. "Challenging, but rewarding." "It's a lot for one man," Rem admitted. "Been thinking of hiring help, but good hands are hard to find, and I can't pay much yet." "You'll get there," Kate said with such confidence that Rem almost believed it himself. They were still talking when Hannah returned, her face lighting up at the sight of Remington, Mr. Cole. What a lovely surprise. The afternoon stretched into evening, and once again, Rem found himself invited to stay for dinner and the night. This time he accepted without pretense of reluctance. Over the next 3 months, Rem found reasons to visit Silvercreek with increasing frequency. Each time, he told himself it was for practical purposes: supplies, information about cattle prices, news of the territory. Each time, he found himself at the Winters boarding house, where Kate always greeted him with a smile that made the long ride worthwhile. During these visits, Rem watched Kate transform from the traumatized young woman he'd found beside a dying mule into a confident, cheerful presence in Silvercreek. She became known for her excellent cooking at the boarding house, and Hannah increasingly relied on her to manage day-to-day operations. Kate, in turn, seemed genuinely pleased whenever Rem appeared. She always made time to sit with him, to hear about his ranch, to share the latest Silvercreek gossip. Sometimes they walked through town together, Kate pointing out changes and improvements with pride, as though she'd lived there for years rather than months. It was during one such walk in late October that their relationship shifted. The afternoon was cool, with the scent of pine and wood smoke in the air. They had stopped at the edge of town, looking out over the valley where Rem's ranch lay some 20 miles distant. "Winter will be here soon," Kate observed, pulling her shawl tighter around her shoulders. "Another month, I reckon," Rem agreed. "Got all my winter preparations done early this year." Kate glanced at him sideways. "Is that why you've had time for so many trips to town?" Rem felt heat rise in his face that had nothing to do with the sun. "Partly," he admitted. "And the other part?" Kate's voice was soft, her eyes focused on the distant hills. Rem took a deep breath. He'd faced down armed outlaws with less trepidation than he felt in this moment. "The other part is standing right here," he said finally. Kate turned to him then, her eyes searching his face. "Remington. I'm not good with words, Kate. Never have been. But these past months." He struggled to find the right phrases. "I find myself thinking about Silvercreek even when I'm at the ranch. About this boarding house. About you." A smile slowly spread across Kate's face, transforming it. "I think about you too," she confessed. "I find myself watching the road from town, hoping to see you riding in." Relief flooded through Rem, followed quickly by a happiness he hadn't felt in years. "I don't have much to offer a woman like you," he said honestly. "My ranch is small. The house is barely more than a cabin. It's a hard life." "I'm not afraid of hard work," Kate said, meeting his eyes steadily. "And I've seen how you treat people, Remington Cole. How you helped a stranger with no thought of reward. That's worth more than a fancy house or easy living." Rem took her hand, marveling at how small and warm it felt in his. "Kate Winters, would you allow me to call on you properly?" "With your aunt's permission, of course." Kate's laugh was like sunshine. "I think Aunt Hannah has been expecting this conversation for at least 2 months. But yes, I would like that very much." With Hannah's enthusiastic blessing, Rem began officially courting Kate. His visits to town became more regular, and now included Sunday dinners at the boarding house, occasional attendance at Silvercreek's small church, and carefully chaperoned walks. To Rem's surprise, the townsfolk seemed to approve of the match. The same people who had once viewed him as the solitary rancher who rarely socialized now greeted him warmly and inquired after Miss Winters. It was a strange sensation to suddenly be part of a community after years of keeping to himself. As December arrived, bringing cold winds and occasional snow, Rem faced a dilemma. The winter months would make travel between his ranch and Silvercreek difficult, sometimes impossible. The thought of not seeing Kate for weeks at a time was unbearable, yet he couldn't abandon his livestock during the harshest season. It was Kate who proposed a solution during one of their walks. "What if I came to the ranch?" she suggested. "Just for a day or two to see it properly. Aunt Hannah could accompany me as chaperone." Rem was both thrilled and terrified by the idea. "It's not much to look at," he warned, "and certainly not as comfortable as the boarding house." Kate squeezed his arm. "I want to see where you live, Remington, the place that's shaped you. Besides," she added with a teasing smile, "if I'm to consider a future there, I should know what I'm getting into." The casual mention of a future together made Rem's heart race. They had spoken of their feelings but not of specific plans. Now, watching Kate's face in the winter sunlight, Rem made a decision. "I'd be honored to show you my ranch," he said. "And if you're willing to brave the ride, I'll make sure it's worth your while." The following week, Rem rode into town with an extra horse, a gentle mare borrowed from a neighbor, and a wagon borrowed from the general store owner. Hannah and Kate were ready, bundled in their warmest clothes, with baskets of food and necessities for their overnight stay. The journey took longer than usual due to the wagon and the occasional patches of snow, but by mid-afternoon, they crested the final hill, and Rem's ranch came into view below them. It wasn't much a sturdy cabin with smoke curling from the chimney, his ranch hand. An elderly man named Jenkins, who looked after things during Rem's absences, would have lit the fire. A barn, corrals, and beyond them, pastures where cattle grazed in the winter sun. Rem watched Kate's face anxiously as she took it all in. "It's small," he said apologetically. "It's wonderful," Kate breathed, her eyes shining. "Look at that view. And the way the cabin sits against those trees for protection from the wind. That's clever building." Rem felt a surge of pride at her approval. "My pa always said to work with the land, not against it." They continued down to the ranch, where Jenkins emerged from the barn to greet them. He'd clearly gone to considerable effort. The cabin was unusually tidy, with a pot of stew simmering on the stove and fresh hay in the barn for the horses. "Pleased to meet you ladies," the old cowboy said, tipping his hat to Hannah and Kate. "Mr. Cole speaks mighty highly of you both." "Thank you for looking after things, Mr. Jenkins," Kate said warmly. "It's clear you take pride in your work." Jenkins beamed at the compliment. "Just doing my job, madam. I'll be staying in the barn tonight to give you folks your privacy." Got it all fixed up comfortable. While Hannah settled into the cabin's small guest room, Rem took Kate on a tour of the ranch. He showed her the spring that provided water year-round, the barn with its sturdy construction, the corrals where he broke horses, and the pastures where his growing herd of cattle grazed. "You've built something real here," Kate said as they stood on a rise overlooking the property. "Something that will last." "Trying to," Rem admitted. "It's slow going sometimes." Kate turned to face him, her cheeks pink from the cold. "But worth it, I think. More worth it now than ever before," Rem said, gathering his courage. He took her gloved hands in his. "Kate, I'm not an educated man, and I don't have fancy words. But these past months, getting to know you, they've been the best of my life." Kate's eyes widened. "Remington, let me finish or I might lose my nerve," he said with a nervous laugh. "I love you, Katherine Winters. I think I started falling for you that first night by the campfire, when you showed such loyalty to that old mule and such courage in the face of loss. I know it hasn't been long, and I know my life here isn't easy, but I'd be honored if you'd consider becoming my wife." Tears sprang to Kate's eyes, but her smile was radiant. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, Remington Cole, I will marry you." Rem pulled her close, his heart pounding so hard he was sure she must feel it. Their first kiss was gentle, a promise sealed in the winter sunlight with the ranch spread out below them. Hannah was overjoyed at the news, embracing them both when they returned to the cabin. "I've been hoping for this," she admitted. "Kate deserves happiness after all she's been through, and I've never seen her as happy as she is with you, Mr. Cole." They agreed to marry in the spring, when travel would be easier for guests and the ranch work less demanding. The engagement was announced in Silvercreek upon their return, and to Rem's amazement, the town responded with genuine pleasure. Kate had become well-liked in her months there, and it seemed some of that goodwill now extended to him. The winter months passed more quickly than any Rem could remember. Despite the weather, he made the journey to Silvercreek whenever possible, sometimes staying for days at the boarding house when snow made return travel impossible. During these visits, he and Kate planned their future together: improvements to the ranch house, strategies for expanding the herd, dreams of children running in the pastures. On his own at the ranch, Rem worked with renewed purpose. He added a proper bedroom to the cabin, expanded the garden plot, and repaired everything that had been neglected during his years of bachelor living. Jenkins, who had initially been hired temporarily, became a permanent fixture, his experience invaluable and his quiet company welcome during the long winter evenings. By March, the snow was melting, and the first signs of spring appeared on the range. Kate and Hannah traveled to the ranch more frequently, bringing furniture, linens, and kitchen supplies to transform the bachelor cabin into a proper home. Kate took particular interest in the garden, planting rows of vegetables and insisting on flowers near the porch to add color to all this practicality. The wedding was set for the first Saturday in May. It would be a simple affair at Silvercreek's small church, followed by a celebration at the boarding house. Kate had ordered a dress from Denver, and Hannah was preparing a feast with help from the town's womenfolk. As the day approached, Rem found himself struck by occasional moments of disbelief. How had he, a solitary rancher with little to recommend him, won the heart of a woman like Kate? She could have had her pick of Silvercreek's eligible men: the banker's son, the young doctor, even the mine owner's nephew who'd made his interest clear. Yet she had chosen him with his rough hands and simple ways. The night before the wedding, Rem sat alone on the boarding house porch, smoking a rare cigarette and contemplating the stars. The door opened behind him, and Kate stepped out, looking lovely in a simple blue dress, her hair loose around her shoulders. "You shouldn't be seeing me," she teased. "It's bad luck before the wedding." "I'll risk it," Rem said, putting out his cigarette and standing. "Couldn't sleep." "Neither could I." Kate came to stand beside him, close enough that he could smell the lavender in her hair. "Nervous." "Not about marrying you," Rem said honestly. "Just about deserving you." Kate turned to him, placing her hand on his chest. "Don't you know by now? You saved me, Remington. Not just my life that day by the Mule, but my hope. My future." "You saved me too," Rem said softly, covering her hand with his own. "I was existing, not living, just going through the motions day after day. You brought light back into my world, Kate." She rose on tiptoe and kissed him softly. "Then we're even," she whispered against his lips. "And tomorrow, we start our life together with no debts between us, only love." The wedding day dawned clear and bright, as though the weather itself blessed their union. Silvercreek's small church was filled to capacity, with townspeople standing along the walls to witness the marriage of Katherine Winters to Remington Cole. Kate was radiant in her cream-colored dress, her hair adorned with wildflowers gathered that morning. Rem, uncomfortably formal in a new suit, forgot his nervousness the moment she appeared in the doorway on the arm of Judge Wilson, who had offered to give her away in her father's absence. The ceremony was brief but heartfelt. When Rem placed the simple gold band on Kate's finger, a ring that had once belonged to his mother, his hands were steady, his voice clear as he spoke his vows. Kate's eyes shone with tears as she promised to love him for all her days. "I now pronounce you husband and wife," the minister said, beaming at the couple. "Mr. Cole, you may kiss your bride." The celebration at the boarding house lasted well into the evening. The entire town seemed to have contributed something: food, drink, music, decorations. Even Jenkins had cleaned up remarkably well and presented them with a hand-carved box for Kate's sewing supplies. As night fell, they slipped away from the celebration to the ranch, where they would begin their life together. The cabin welcomed them with lamplight glowing in the windows, Jenkins's final gift before he departed for town to give them privacy. Rem lifted Kate over the threshold, both of them laughing at the formality. Inside, the cabin was transformed clean, comfortable, with touches of Kate's influence already visible in the curtains at the windows and the quilt on the bed. "Welcome home, Mrs. Cole," Rem said softly, setting her down in the middle of the main room. Kate turned slowly, taking in their home with shining eyes. "It's perfect," she whispered. Later, as moonlight filtered through the curtains, Kate lay in Rem's arms, her head on his chest, her breathing soft and even. Rem stroked her hair, marveling at the twist of fate that had brought them together: a chance encounter in the vast wilderness, a dying mule, a whispered confession of loss that had opened the door to a future neither could have imagined. "What are you thinking?" Kate murmured sleepily. "That I'm the luckiest man in the territory," Rem answered truthfully. She tilted her face up to his, smiling in the darkness. "And I'm the luckiest woman. Who would have thought that the worst day of my life would lead me to the best?" Spring gave way to summer, and the ranch flourished under their combined efforts. Kate proved to be as hardworking and practical as Rem had believed, taking to ranch life with determination and good humor. She transformed the cabin into a true home, established a productive vegetable garden, learned to ride expertly, and even helped with the cattle when extra hands were needed. Their first year passed in a blur of work and happiness. The ranch expanded as Rem was able to purchase additional grazing land and increase his herd. Kate's cooking became legendary in the area, and their home often welcomed travelers and neighbors, ending Rem's years of isolation. In the fall of their second year of marriage, Kate shared the news Rem had been hoping for. They were expecting a child in the spring. The months that followed were filled with preparations and planning, with Hannah making frequent trips from Silvercreek to help ready the house for the new arrival. On a perfect May morning, almost exactly 2 years after their wedding, Katherine Cole gave birth to a healthy baby girl. They named her Elizabeth Hannah Cole, but called her Beth. With her mother's sage green eyes and her father's determined chin, she was the perfect blend of them both. As Rem held his daughter for the first time, looking down at Kate's tired but radiant face, he was overwhelmed by a love so powerful it left him speechless. This was his family, the family he'd never dared hope for during those solitary years. "She's beautiful," he managed finally, his voice rough with emotion, "just like her mother." Kate reached up to touch his face, wiping away tears he hadn't realized were falling. "She's your daughter too." Remington looked at that determined little frown. "She's already planning to run the ranch someday." Rem laughed, the sound full of joy and wonder. "I reckon she just might." As Beth grew, so did the ranch. Rem's careful management and Kate's practical business sense turned their small operation into one of the most successful in the region. They added on to the house, built a proper bunkhouse for the hands they now employed year-round, and established a reputation for fair dealing and quality livestock. 3 years after Beth's birth, Kate gave birth to twins Robert James and William Thomas, adding boisterous boy energy to their growing family. Hannah eventually sold the boarding house and moved to the ranch to help with the children, her presence a blessing as the demands of the expanding ranch and growing family increased. On the 5th anniversary of the day Rem found Kate beside her dying mule, they stood together on the hill overlooking their ranch. Below them, the house glowed with lamplight, smoke curling from the chimney. Beth played in the fenced yard under Hannah's watchful eye, while the twins napped inside. Cattle grazed in the lush pastures, horses moved in the corrals, and ranch hands went about their evening chores. "I never dreamed of this," Kate said softly, leaning against Rem's shoulder. "When I was huddled beside poor Bessie, thinking I'd lost everything, I couldn't imagine finding so much more." Rem wrapped his arm around her waist, pulling her close against the evening chill. "I used to ride this range alone, thinking this was all life had for me, work and solitude. I never knew what I was missing until I found you." Kate turned in his arms, her face as beautiful to him now as it had been that first day, perhaps more so for the love and shared experiences that had mapped its contours. "Do you remember what I whispered to you that day?" she asked. "About Bessie being all I had left in the world?" Rem nodded, the memory still clear despite the years between. "I remember everything about that day." "I was wrong," Kate said simply. "I had nothing then, but I had everything waiting for me, you, this ranch, our children. A future I couldn't even imagine." Rem kissed her softly, his heart full beyond measure. "And it's only just beginning, Kate Cole. Only just beginning." As the sun set over their land, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, Remington and Katherine Cole walked hand in hand down the hill toward home, toward the life they had built together from an encounter in the wilderness, a chance meeting that had grown into a love story as vast and enduring as the western sky above them.